are so excited to introduce you to our speaker of the month. So, as you know, every month we have a different theme, and it's the same theme for all our 220 cities in the world. So this month is the theme of procrastination, procrastinate. So, aside from your taxes, I hope everyone did their taxes. I know it was a rough month, but we're not going to be talking about that today. We have a super special guest, and I'm going to present her to you. So, welcome Stephanie Pellett. She is a creative coach and consultant for small businesses and entrepreneurs. Her goal is to make your business more sustainable, more expansive, and ultimately more fun for you. When she is not teaching about stumbling blocks to productivity and coaching clients out of imposter syndrome, you can find her reading novels and spending time outside. So I really want to share a fun fact about Stephanie. She read 112 books on her best reading year, you guys. Can you believe it? She must be special, right? Stephanie, thank you so much for joining today and for sharing your amazing insights. We love your YouTube videos. And yeah, I'm just going to hand the mic to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Mar. Yeah, special or a huge nerd. I don't know the difference between those two. Okay, so let me just start by sharing my screen. I'm also going to pop out the chat. So if someone could let me know if you can see my screen and my slides. Okay, perfect. I think that's a yes. Okay, cool. And you can see the move if I do that. Amazing. Okay. Well, hi everyone. Thank you so much, Mar, for that wonderful introduction, and thank you to Creative Mornings for having me. I am so excited to be here. Creative Mornings was actually one of the first events that I attended when I moved to this city. It was one of the first that made it feel like home for me, so it is a really cool full circle moment to get to be here speaking to all of you on a topic that I find really interesting. In the breakout rooms, we were kind of chatting about it already, but procrastination, I think it's something that a lot of creative people struggle with, and I'm excited to kind of talk through my ideas on it. I wanted to start by sharing this beautiful piece of art that was created for Creative Mornings this month, and it went out to all of the chapters around the world because, as you can see, they are reading, and that's my favorite thing to do, whether or not I'm procrastinating, so it felt very appropriate. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about me. So Mar already did, but yes, I am a business coach for creative, values-based entrepreneurs who are thoughtful, who want to be more productive, who want to grow their businesses in a way that feels sustainable and also fun. And spoiler alert, I don't super believe in procrastination. And by that, I mean, I think that there's almost always an extremely good reason as to why we're procrastinating. And if we can figure out what the reason is, we can usually make a lot more progress than just labeling it procrastination and throwing up our hands. So a little bit about what I believe in, so you can know going into this talk. I'm not going to tell you to pursue productivity at all costs. Number one, human beings are not robots. Peak productivity, maximum efficiency, like these things are not what I think we should be striving for all the time. We need to be pursuing balanced, well-rounded lives. And so it helps to remember that we're not machines, we're organic living beings, and we'll be touching on that in this talk. Number two, there is no one size fits all here. With any advice, really, everybody is different, and you could be living in the same house as somebody else or same apartment complex and be having very different realities. So no one exists in a vacuum. I can't provide advice without knowing the context of your life. So what I'm hoping to provide today is sort of a framework or a series of questions that you can ask yourself to sort of see where in your life some of these factors may be coming into play and how you could tailor fit this framework to your situation. And lastly, I believe that productivity needs to have a purpose. So it is not the be-all, end-all thing, right? It is a means to an end. And in my opinion, the reason why I care about productivity and procrastination by extension is because I want you to reach more of the people who need your work. I want your work to get seen by the people who are going to benefit from it. So it needs to have a purpose. I'm not just going to be telling you to, pursue productivity and just become this automaton for no reason. There needs to be a reason. So starting there, let's start by defining what procrastination actually is. So it is defined as the action of delaying or postponing something. But this was actually the most basic definition that I could find that didn't involve like a value judgment being placed on it. So a lot of definitions say the action of delaying something that you should do. But I don't really believe in the shoulds. I think that in everything, even your day job, you have a choice as to whether or not you want to do something. So that didn't feel like a super helpful definition or a really good place to start. And I think this simpler definition gets a little bit closer to my personal philosophy, which is that there is almost always a good reason for procrastination. And before you jump in and say, the reason is I'm just such a procrastinator, I'm going to stop you right there. We are not going to be doing that today. I do not believe in that. I think it's really important we don't claim this identity of procrastinator. I think it's really important that we don't tell each other that, I'm so lazy. I've just not been able to get this done. I'm such a procrastinator. I hear that with clients sometimes or friends. And I really believe very strongly that language matters and the way we talk about ourselves matters. And this can have the biggest impact, I think, the biggest negative impact on your procrastination because it chips away at your self-confidence, your feelings of self-worth if you claim this as an identity. And the reason is because it's a very fixed mindset. It's sort of like, well, if I'm a procrastinator, I'm just a procrastinator. There's not a lot that I can do about it. But if we come back to the simple definition, it becomes easier to ask ourselves, why? Why am I procrastinating on this task? Why am I delaying or postponing it? And let's assume that we have a really good reason. And the reason is not just that we're lazy, because that's unhelpful. So I like to use this prompt for self-compassion, which is to say, this makes sense because. So if I say, I just am not able to get things done because I'm a procrastinator, the sentence ends there. But if I say, I am procrastinating and it makes sense that I'm procrastinating because, suddenly we're opened up to all of these other possibilities as to why that might be happening. And we can investigate new avenues and explore new places that might be able to help us narrow it down to why this is happening. I'm seeing people saying in the chat that they used to claim that label of procrastinator, and yeah, it's not helpful. It doesn't help us kind of get to where we want to go. So as I started to plan this talk, I was trying to come up with a metaphor that would feel approachable and fun, because sometimes our creative work can feel a little scary, frankly, to put ourselves out there and do the kind of work that we are really excited to do in the world. And so I came up with a really simple one that I think everyone has heard of before. I thought maybe today we could roast a chicken. And I'm going to explain why. I am a vegetarian. I've been mostly vegetarian since I was 18 years old. I have never attempted to roast a chicken. I have never wanted to roast a chicken. I have never attempted to roast any cut of meat. So ironically, it actually seemed like a pretty good metaphor for some of the scarier and more intimidating parts of my work, because it is unknown to me. It is something that feels very scary to me. I don't consider myself to have an identity of someone who knows how to roast a chicken. And so it felt like, okay, this is a very simple way that we can approach this bigger, scarier topic of creative procrastination by understanding why maybe I, as a non-vegetarian, might procrastinate. And there's all kinds of reasons why I might procrastinate on this task. I found this quote from Julia Child that I thought was so apt and so perfect for this talk. What a deceptively simple dish the roast chicken is. And I love that piece around being deceptively simple, because this applies equally to our decisions and our ideas about our best work. Often it feels very simple, right? I should just sit down and write that thing, design that thing, do that thing. And when it doesn't come easily to us, we call ourselves lazy. We feel guilty. We wonder why it came easier last week. We feel overwhelmed. I know, I'm sorry, Elizabeth. I did question whether I should put in this this photo because I find it a little gross too, but I just love Meryl Streep so much. I had to use it. So I'm going to go through some reasons why we might be procrastinating, different factors that you could consider, and there's 8 ones that I'm going to cover here today. There might be more that I haven't thought of, and if I miss any, I would love to hear them in the chat. So let's move into number 1. So number 1, let's assume, I've meaning to roast this chicken. I've been wanting to learn for years, and I never get around to it. So what are the reasons why it might make sense that I am procrastinating on this chicken. So number one, do I have the motivation? Why should I roast a chicken anyway? Is that something I genuinely want to do? Or is it something that I just, saw on a list somewhere and someone was like, everyone should learn how to roast a chicken by this particular age? It's really important, I think, with any project that we're working on that we have a really compelling reason to do it. And it's not just because you saw someone else doing it or some industry leader told you that to be successful in your business, you should be doing this particular task. I see that a lot with my clients where something just appears on the to-do list and we don't really understand where it came from. It's not really connected to their deeper reasons or their deeper purpose. I think the best whys are ones that feel really connected to your purpose, your vocation, the work you want to do in the world. And I think that sometimes if we can't find a true reason that you feel connected to do something, then maybe this actually isn't procrastination, but just a lack of motivation. And I think there's a big difference there. Now, sometimes we don't have a choice, right? Sometimes we have to do like super tedious, annoying work. But I think even in those cases, can we see if we can find a way to connect it to a reason that we can care about? So for instance, if you have to do all kinds of annoying paperwork to apply for a grant, maybe you remind yourself again and again that the reason I'm doing this is because I want to make this movie and I want the money to make that happen. So sometimes we can motivate ourselves through annoying tasks by really focusing on our why. This is not the only way to motivate ourselves, right? It's not the only reason for procrastination, but it's a good place to start because sometimes we can just check things off our list by just dropping them completely, right? Don't forget that that's the easiest way to get things done. So in my case, let's imagine that my big why is that in my family, roasted chicken is like a very important special dish that's been passed down for generations. It's really important that everyone learn how to do it. And so, that's not true in my case, but if it were, that might be enough of a reason that I'm like, you know what, this passes the first test. I do have the motivation to do this. Test number 2 is why right now? And I think this is a big place where people get stuck with procrastination because sometimes it's actually not urgent, but we're still labeling it procrastination. So you got to figure out, does this chicken need to be roasted imminently or at some point in the distant future? Sometimes we're putting things off because we intentionally know in this season of our lives, I'm not going to have time to work on this project. But then we spend the whole time beating ourselves up and calling it procrastination. So remember that there's a very big difference between intentionally putting something on the back burner and procrastinating on it, and make sure you know which one is happening at what time. But if you decide, I actually really do want to make this an urgent thing, sometimes the trouble with creative work is that no one is waiting for it, right? It's because I want to, write this novel or put out this movie. No one's waiting for that. That's my creativity. I need to motivate myself to do it. And so how do we create urgency when none exists? Well, there's a lot of different ways. A lot of people call this accountability. I think accountability is an extremely important thing. Yeah, Kyla's saying have an accountability partner. Totally. I think accountability groups are really key, accountability partners. If you're in a writing group that meets once a month, maybe that's suddenly helpful for helping you meet these deadlines. You kind of have to create the urgency for yourself. Ask yourself what you really need in order to get things done, and figure out what you're going to need to have it happen now rather than later. So in my case, I might decide to have a dinner party for Mother's Day. That's not going to be a reality this year, but I could have a dinner party for Mother's Day. I could invite my whole family over, and I'm going to make the chicken for that dinner. So now I have a timeline and I have accountability to make this happen. So that's step number 2. Number 3, do I have the clarity about how to roast a chicken? Indeed, no, I do not. And I think this is actually one that most of the time, this is what's going on when I work with clients. It's like the reason we're putting it off is because we're intimidated. We're unfamiliar, let's say, with the program we have to use. We've never used it before, or it's going to require us to open up that one document we worked on 6 months ago, and we're like kind of afraid of what we're going to find in there, so we just never open up the document. And it also means when we don't have this kind of clarity, we don't really remember or know the scope of the work involved. Usually what we've tasked ourselves with is way too broad. So for example, if your creative bucket list, as I'm sure for many of us, says, write the next great Canadian novel, right? Or your recipe just says, step 1, roast the chicken, right? Those are kind of comparable. I'm going to say it's no wonder that you haven't done that yet, because that's a really big project. That's not just a task. That's not something that I can just put in my daily schedule, right? I don't have time to just roast a chicken, between the hours of 3 and 3:30 p.m. So we need to break our projects down into really small pieces and then make sure we have enough detail and specificity on every single one of those pieces. If you're just starting out, you don't know what all the steps are going to be, that's okay. Just start with the really small steps that you already know. And oftentimes if I'm procrastinating on something, it's because it's too broad. And I like to break my tasks down until they're so small that there's honestly no point in procrastinating on them. So when I was outlining this workshop, for instance, I didn't just put on my to-do list, create the talk for Creative Mornings, because that would have been a recipe for disaster. Instead, I had to say, day 1, it's just the brain dump. Then I'm done for the day. Day 2, I am going to, write the outline. Day 3, I'm going to do a rough draft of my slides. And so little by little, the work starts to come together. I'm not just putting, that step 1 energy onto my to-do list. So in our example, for me, I'm going to need to find a really good detailed recipe, basically like roasting chickens for dummies, because I am, that explains every step of the process in great detail, so I have clarity on everything that I'm trying to do. Okay, next up, time. Speaking of breaking things down, have you given yourself enough space, enough buffer to ensure that you can actually get this work done? So as I said before, if you have a full day full of meetings and responsibilities and work, and then you're trying to put a big creative project onto that to-do list in the middle of your day, especially if you haven't broken it down into small pieces, it's probably not going to happen. And that's what you're going to be calling procrastination when you push it off day after day after day. But the fact is that you honestly didn't have time to do it because what you were trying to put on your to-do list was more like 18 tasks in one, right? If you say, create this new workshop for creatives that I've been wanting to do for a year, that's probably more like 18 tasks, each of which need to happen on a different day. So make sure that you don't have your schedule super crowded. You have it blocked out into time. Yeah, Elizabeth is saying small, repeatable time blocks, totally. So making sure that these tasks can fit into these small areas and really breaking it down very small. Usually when we're putting something off, it's because we actually can't fit it into where we need it to go. So maybe my chicken needs to be prepped over 2 days. So in an evening, I need to do the marinade and then let it rest overnight. I think, I don't know if any of this is true. And then on the day, I need to, actually give it a few hours in the oven so it has time to cook all the way through. Brine. Okay, I'm seeing Amy say brine. Great. I got to brine the chicken. I didn't even know that was a step. See, I need my clarity. And so to make sure I'm not going to procrastinate on this or postpone my dinner party, I'm going to need to not have plans the night before, that it's going to take up all my time and not give me the space and time to do it. And I definitely need to not be, fully booked back to back to back to back on the day of the dinner party, so I don't even have time to put it in the oven. So before you label it procrastination, make sure you're giving yourself a chance to succeed here and that you actually have time to do what you're trying to do. Okay, next up. Does my oven have power? And in our metaphor, this is extremely literal. If you didn't have an oven for some reason because you just moved into a new house or the power went out on your block, you would not be calling that procrastinating. If you couldn't roast a chicken, you would say, well, how am I supposed to roast a chicken when I don't have energy to roast a chicken? We sometimes struggle to apply this to our own selves, but we too are living, breathing organisms that need energy to cook metaphorical chickens. So if you don't have enough sleep, if you don't have enough water, if you don't have enough food, if you haven't had a snack, if you are at a particular part in your menstrual cycle, it's going to be very difficult to make it happen, especially when we're talking about creative work that is like very juicy. It requires a lot of brain power. I also was speaking to someone in the breakout room, and they were talking about how like at the end of a really long day, they don't have the energy that it requires to work on this big creative project that they've been wanting to work on. So that's another one. If your brain power is really drained after a very exhausting day of meetings and other tasks, I'm not going to call that procrastination. I'm going to call that like a natural consequence and recovery time that you require. Another big one that I see, and it wouldn't be a Stephanie Pellett presentation if I didn't mention it, but I'm also seeing a lot of cognitive interruptions. So are you constantly being interrupted by your phone, by your kids? Technology is a huge one here. If you're constantly having something that's zapping your focus and your energy, all the time, then no wonder it's going to be very difficult to make progress on the things that you want to make progress on. Next up, marination, and this is kind of where the chicken metaphor came from. So if you're wondering where that came from and why it's so random, it's because I actually think sometimes what we're calling procrastination is a need for marination. And this is particularly true in creative life. Oftentimes we're working on projects over a long period of time, and they need time to sort of stew. Maybe you haven't been introduced to this one person yet who is going to give you this amazing idea that's going to make everything else come together. Maybe you just need longer for the ideas to sort of like meet each other, and maybe you need to have more conversations with each other, with other people in your life, to sort of see where the connections are. I think where we do ourselves a disservice is when we call that procrastination and we add this layer of guilt and shame onto what is actually just a longer period of like stewing, So if you've done everything else, you've checked yourself for all of these other checks on procrastination, all these other factors that you might be dealing with, maybe the question is not how can I do it now, but maybe the question is, how can I do this later? Why do I need to do this now? There's a big difference between procrastinating and letting things get a little juicier. Last two here are a little trickier, and I think this is where we sometimes get into trouble. So confidence. Am I even capable of roasting a chicken? I don't know. I've never done it before. It does seem a little scary. What if I serve raw chicken to everybody in my family? That feels a little scary. And so sometimes, with our creative work, it's the scariest kind of work because it is the most intimidating. It's the least urgent, as I mentioned before, right? Nobody's waiting for it. So there's no external pressures. It's the most unknown, the most abstract. So it's this new frontier. And as I've said before, it does help to break it down into small pieces and take them one step at a time. Another thing that I think is really helpful here is, call your mom, your metaphorical mom. In this case, I'd be calling her because, this lady has roasted a chicken in her day. But maybe in yours, it's tapping into your broader creative community, finding someone who's done what you're trying to do already. They've written that book, they've made that movie, they've put out that submission into a big magazine. Figure out who you can ask for support and advice, who could maybe bolster you on this journey. And lastly, one of my coaches, Kelly Deals, she likes to say, remember who you are. And by this, she means remember all of the challenging things that you have done in other areas of your life and see if you can borrow confidence from those places. So I don't know you, but you've done some hard things. For sure, I know that. Maybe you've trained a dog. Maybe you've managed a small team. Maybe, you've given birth, right? Like those are all really hard things. And so where can we borrow confidence from when we're facing something brand new that feels scary to us? And remember that confidence begets confidence. So the more that we can do this work, the more confident we're going to feel. And lastly, I saved the worst for last, resistance. So if you haven't read the works of Steven Pressfield yet, I would highly encourage you to just turn off this whole thing and go get them. There's been probably nothing more impactful in terms of my career than his books, The War of Art and Turning Pro, for helping me to show up even when I'm feeling really scared or I feel like a fraud. Because I think the elephant in the room of procrastination, the big elephant, is that usually we're scared that we're not going to succeed. We're afraid that we're going to put ourselves out there and be really vulnerable, especially with creative work, and that it's not going to be received well. And so that holds us back from wanting to share it at all. And this is a big problem. I think, what I love about this concept of resistance is that it explains why. Essentially, what he's labeling as resistance is like a collection of behaviors and forces that we enact essentially to protect ourselves from pain. When we're scared of being vulnerable, this force of resistance swoops in and tries to keep us really small and quiet so that we never have to get vulnerable in that way. So instead of doing the work, that's why we procrastinate, we get really busy. Sometimes we mysteriously come down with a cold right before we're supposed to do, this big thing. So it's all ways to try to protect ourselves from the pain that we imagine we're going to feel if we put our creative work out there and it's not well received. And I think really the solution to this is kind of twofold or threefold. First, it's about remembering that it's also really painful to let your creative dreams languish. It's also really painful to not share your truth and share what you believe in. And so despite our worst predictions, it actually usually hurts a lot more to keep our work in than it would to put it out there and see what people are going to say about it. Secondly, I think we have to remember that the worst case scenario is not all that bad, right? We can write something and create it, and then the worst case scenario is we have a shitty first draft of something that we hate and we never want to look at again. But at least it's out of us. At least it's something I could work with and edit and show to somebody, show to a friend, or never show to anyone again. I have a novel that I've never shown to anyone. So, but at least it's out of me. At least I don't have to worry about it. And then the third thing, that Stephen Pressfield recommends is that all we can do is show up anyway. Develop some kind of creative practice that allows you to meet yourself day after day, week after week, in small ways, and practice showing up even when we're scared. After all, this is one of my favorite quotes from him: the more scared we are about a work or calling, the more sure we can be that we have to do it. So if you'll excuse me, I go have a chicken to roast. Thank you so much for being here. This was so much fun, and I really, really hope we can stay in touch.
All righty, everyone. How about a big round of gibberish applause in the chat? How about we get a bunch of gibberish? And the more gibberish you put in, the louder the applause. Oh, look at that.
I love that.
Stephanie, thank you so much. I got a few questions. Some people PM me some questions here. Yeah. But if anyone else has questions, you can feel free to put them in the chat after the gibberash. All right. So the first question that I want to touch on, and I'm sorry if I don't get to all of them, everyone, but this one to me really resonated because this is me. Yeah. I keep trying to learn how to play guitar, and that guitar has dust on it. It's sitting right. I'm not even going to look at it because I can feel it looking at me. You know what I mean? And so one person asked, what if the thing you're procrastinating on is your personal social development because you work so much? So you're not really procrastinating on the actual professional life. You're procrastination in your like social and your personal development life, i.e. learning to play the guitar or learning a language, that kind of stuff. Any advice for that?
So I think my answer would be twofold. One is the physical energy thing that we touched on in the talk. If you don't have the energy at the end of your day, I think it's unrealistic to expect yourself to be able to do all of this, fun, creative, personal development work, which, as we know, takes a lot of energy. So it could be about prioritizing it differently. Maybe instead of at the end of a long day, maybe it's about putting it on the weekend when you do have energy. If you genuinely are motivated to do it and you feel it's like important, then that's sometimes like switching it up, right? Something I didn't mention is like, can you wake up a little earlier and do something in the morning before you check your email, before you let those distractions in for the day? So that's kind of one thing. The other thing that I'm curious about is, Ivan, like your tendency. So if people haven't taken this quiz, I'll put it in the chat. It's quiz.gretchenrubin.com. And it's this quiz that kind of tells you your tendency when it comes to expectations. And so one of the things I might be curious about is whether you have like an obliger tendency, which means that you require outer accountability in order to do something. That's often a culprit when people are having trouble, like, they're able to do everything for work, but then when it comes to their meditation habit, it's not happening. A lot of times it's because those people actually require accountability in some way that has to be outside of themselves. So I don't know what that would look like. Maybe it's like your partner is doing it with you, or you're joining like a group class live in the morning so you can't skip it. Or I would say, maybe Ivan, you're a rebel. And so anytime there's like an expectation placed on you, you're like, I don't want to do it. Whether someone else told me or myself told me, I still don't want to do it. And in those cases, she has a whole framework that she goes through for rebels, that is essentially talking about like needing to focus on identity. So like really starting with your identity, like I'm somebody who plays the guitar in the morning, or in the afternoon or evening or whatever, and focusing on that, or giving yourself like choice or consequences. So like if I don't do this, I'm never going to be able to XYZ outcome. And that often works well for rebels. So I really love the 4 tendencies. It wasn't something I was able to get into in my talk, but I really encourage people to check it out. It's huge. So yeah.
So that's it. And then you shared that. I saw you typing it. Where was that? Let's see here. If we can just share that again in the chat, the link, so we can all test ourselves. Yeah. And I think you make a very valid point. You make a very valid point in terms of like, some of us just need to be like in a group to do the thing that we do, or we have to like put it in our schedule, or some of us are just like, I don't want to do it because someone said I should, which is totally me. Yeah. I never wanted to rebel until someone told me I couldn't.
Yeah. I think the key that I'm trying to get across is like, and I tried to say this in a few different ways in the talk, is that like, with productivity and procrastination, there is a lot of shame. And I think the shame is so counterproductive. So if we can like strip that out, like don't feel ashamed you need outer accountability, just find a way to make it happen. And then you'll be able to make more progress. So yeah, it's about figuring out what you need and giving it to yourself.
Before I get to the next question, a reminder to everyone, please. After we finish with Stephanie, it's going to be our time for 30-second pitches. So if anyone wants to do a 30-second pitch, please send me a message now. Please send me a message now if you want to do a 30-second pitch. Yeah. And Stephanie, I'm going to invite you, preview now to 30-second pitch before we're done with you today. Okay. Oh, yeah. Don't worry. I'm going to help you. Don't worry. I'm going to make it so easy for you. You have no idea. No idea. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be awesome. But if you want to do a 30-second pitch, please just put it in the chat right now. Very interesting question. And I actually think you touched on this a little bit, but someone asked me, what if your problem is not procrastination? What if it's inspiration? I'm assuming they're an artist or something like that. And the idea was they're like, and I felt that way. Like sometimes when I have to design a slide deck and I'm just like, I just don't even know how to, like, I don't even know what pictures I want to find. Do you know what I mean? So it's not that you're procrastinating, it's that there's no inspiration to start moving forward. You touched on it a little bit near the end of your chat. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that.
I think that's a really cool question. One thing that I would say, the first thing that came to mind when you were talking, Ivan, with your example, like this presentation, I feel like different days are good for different things, and we don't always know what the day is going to be good for when we first wake up, but we can have these ideas about like, I should design the presentation today. But it may not actually be the time. I feel like sometimes these things feel very mystical to me. Like, I don't know what needs to happen in order for me to be ready to choose the pictures, but then suddenly something happens and I'm like ready to choose the pictures. And if I had tried to do it the first day, it would not have flowed. It would have taken me 4 hours. And then this other day, suddenly, I don't know, maybe I'm more well rested. I feel more confident. I don't know what it is. And then suddenly it just happens in, 30 seconds. I think someone was saying that when I was chatting to them in the breakout room. So I guess that my answer would be like time. Like, can you give yourself time? Like, how much more buffer can you give yourself? And are you trying to impose deadlines that are a bit arbitrary? I think I run into that all the time in my business work, where I've just put something on the to-do list for a certain day, and then that day comes around and I don't actually have the energy or the capacity, or I didn't sleep well the night before. And so I think it's about being flexible and rearranging your schedule too, and recognizing that just because you put something somewhere doesn't mean you can't move it. That's something I really had to train myself out of. I use a to-do list software, and one of the reasons I use Notion for those who are curious, and one of the reasons I chose it is because in the calendar view I can literally just move a task to another day, and then it's like it never happened. It's like it was never on the first day. So it really has helped cure me of my, desperate need to like do something just because I said I was going to do it a week ago on this day, so now I have to do it on this day. So yeah, I would give yourself more time. Okay. I love that, Laura. So I just saw something that Laura shared in the chat, and that's something that Stephen Pressfield talks about a lot in his book. So she said, I think inspiration sometimes comes from the practice of showing up again and again. And that's, kind of what I was trying to get at with that resistance slide, is he talks about how we have to sit down every day and slay this dragon of resistance. And only when we do that, only when we're in the habit, does the muse know that we're reliable. And I just love that. It's like the muse suddenly realizes, oh, she's coming every day. Okay, now I can send her some inspiration. So yeah, you didn't know this was going to get so woo-woo on a Friday morning, but I believe it. I think when we prove ourselves to be reliable, like transmitters of inspiration, I think inspiration comes more to us. Yeah, I'm loving my woo girls in the chat. Woo!
Okay. All right. Yeah. All right, cool. All right. I got a couple of fun ones here. Okay. Yeah. A couple of fun ones here. Please. And then we'll finish off with your 30-second pitch. But don't worry. I'm going to help you. It's going to be amazing. Don't even worry about it. Okay. First thing. Have you ever suffered from imposter syndrome? Is what someone asked.
For sure. Every day. Yesterday. This morning. Yeah. Every day. I think imposter syndrome is also something. I was talking to someone about this morning, this week, that like imposter syndrome is also something that we should try to avoid attaching our identities to, because I think it can do more harm than good. But my favorite way to get around imposter syndrome is to remind myself that it's not all about me, and not be so selfish. So sometimes I say it in a very sassy way, like, stop being so selfish. And it, we can be gentler with ourselves in that, but it sometimes helps like snap me out of it, because when I'm feeling imposter syndrome, I'm making it all about me, my feelings, my fears, like, whether or not I'm good enough, what people are going to think of me. Okay. But all of us in our creativity, I don't care what your creativity is. You have something that's going to benefit someone else, right? And so your imposter syndrome, if it's keeping you quiet and silent, you're able to not be of service to other people. So that sometimes helps like break me out of it, so I can actually like show up and give people what I have to offer. And whether or not it's enough, that's not up for me to decide.
And I will say that just to help Stephanie with all her imposter syndrome, and you were great today, but like I said, you suffer from it. I totally suffer from it. We all suffer from it. Can we give her a little love in the chat there? Because Creative Mornings, double hearts. Well,
I think the thing about it too is you sort of get to a point, and the same is true with resistance, where you get to a point where you're like, it's gonna be there. So when I say I have imposter syndrome, it's not like I ever was like, I'm not gonna come and do this. I still
face it. You face your imposter syndrome, and by facing it, you overcome it.
Exactly.
And it happened, and it's always going to be there, because every time I feel it, I like to think of it as like, okay, I may be an imposter, but I'm still doing it. And then afterward, I'm like, I did that.
Yeah. And the more you do it, the less powerful it is.
All right, we got some fun ones. You said at the beginning, when I first moved here, where'd you move from?
Most recently, I had moved from Ecuador, Quito.
Wow.
And before that, I went to school in Montreal. I grew up kind of close to Toronto, but I had never lived in the city before.
Okay, very interesting. You read 112 books. Name 14. I'm just kidding. I'm totally kidding. Can you recommend?
I don't remember what year that was. But I do have a Goodreads profile, so if anyone is curious about what I'm reading, it's all there. It's all there.
So check out Stephanie's Goodreads profile. Maybe we can find that link before we finish off for today.
Oh God, it's full of also like some embarrassing romance novels, so no judgment. Okay.
I'm like, you know what? I'll tell you this. As an adult man, I read my little brothers. As an like a 29, 30-year-old man, I read like my little brother's like 12-year-old like animal medieval fiction stories.
You know what?
There, I said it. I said it in front of everybody.
Yeah, you got to do what you got to do. Like every romance novel has a happy ending, and I think we could all, use some of that energy in this pandemic. So,
all right, and now 30-second pitch before we pass it on to our other 30-second pitch.
Ivan, let me just please.
Mara, I was going to pass it to you. Okay, but go ahead.
Yeah, don't worry. No, I just want to repeat the heart thing that you do with the little heart, or you can just like do like this. I want to take a screenshot of all of you.
Oh,
we do it at 3. 1, 2, 3. I cannot do it. Like, how do I? Hold on. 3.
Am I doing it right?
Like this.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Stephanie, so much. You are so like all the things that you said. I just wanted to like write it down, and just like we had so much activity on the chat. Thank you for being so participative, all of you. I think I just wanted to add like some advice that I got was to just think about what is important for you, like deeply, like is it super important for you to learn the guitar, Ivan, or like write the book? So you should do that first thing in the morning. Try to do it. Try to give a little bit of time in the morning. Just don't like answer your work emails first just because it's urgent. It's different urgent than important. So that has helped me so much. And I wanted to just add that. And yes, definitely like imposter syndrome, totally agree. Like we all have that daily. So just keep going, right? Thank you so much.